Okay, so part four of this article. Uh, it doesn't make any sense if you just tune in now and don't have the context for it, but let me continue. So essentially, this is how these microfinance finance loans into impoverished countries worked out in reality. So in 2012, it emerged that while KSA IPO, in other words, the venture that Omidyar was deeply involved in, was making millions for its wealthy investors, hundreds of heavily indebted residents of India's Andhra Pradesh state were driven into despair and suicide by the company's cruel and aggressive debt collecting practices. The rash of suicide soared right at the peak of the large micro-lending bubble in Andhra Pradesh, in which many of the poor were taking out multiple microloans to cover previous loans that they could no longer pay. It was subprime lending fraud taken to the poorest regions of the world, and essentially stripping them of what little they had to live on. It got to the point where the chief minister of Andhra Pradesh publicly appealed to the state's youth and young women not to commit suicide, telling them your lives are valuable. The AP, Associated Press, conducted a stunning, in-depth investigation of KSK suicides, and their reporting needs to be quoted at length to understand how evil this program is. The article begins. First, they were stripped of their utensils, their furniture, mobile phones, televisions, ration cards, and heirloom jewelry. Then some of them drank pesticides. One woman threw herself into a pond. Another jumped into a well with her children. Sometimes the debt collectors watched, standing nearby. Okay, now I realize, coming from me now, this is appealing to the emotional side, in all of us. I I sense that. I take it with a grain of salt, you understand? But there is absolutely some truth to this. So, beyond the AP investigation and internal reports showed how brutal the SKS microfinancing program was, how women were particularly targeted because of their heightened sense of shame and community responsibility. Here is the brutal reality of financial capitalism compared to the utopian blather mouthed at the Davos conferences or in the slick pamphlets of the Omidyar network. Both reports said that SKS employees had verbally harassed over-indebted borrowers, forced them to pawn their valuable items, such as, some little gold trinkets from their families, incited other borrowers to humiliate them, and orchestrated sit-ins outside their homes to publicly shame them. In some cases, the SKS staff physically abused defaulters, according to the report commissioned by the company. Only in death would the debts be forgiven. So there's other lurid tales here that he can look up. So as the result of the bad press this scandal caused, the Omidyar network deleted its Unitas investment from its website. Nor does Omidyar boast of its investments in that particular microfinance company any longer. Meanwhile, Unitas mysteriously dissolved itself and laid off all of its employees right around the time of the IPO, under a cloud of suspicion that Unitas insiders made huge personal profits from this venture. Profits that, in theory, were supposed to be reinvested in expanding microlending to the poor. Thus spoke the profit motive. So this article goes on, but the SKS is not the only microfinancing investment gone bad. The biggest and most reputable microlenders, including those funded by Omidyar, by the Omidyar network have come under serious and sustained criticism for predatory interest rates and their aggressive debt collection techniques. So there was BRAC, another big beneficiary of the Omidyar network, efforts to boost financial inclusion. Started in the 1970s as a war relief organization, BRAC has grown into the largest non-governmental organization in the world. It employs over 100,000 people in countries across the globe. While BRAC, B-R-A-C, is mostly known for its micro-lending activities, the outfit is basically diversified nonprofit business operation. It is involved in education, healthcare, and even develops its own hybrid seed companies. Most of what BRAC's operations are financed by its micro-lending activities. Omidyar Network praises BRAC for its work to empower the poor to improve their own lives, and has given $8 million to help BRAC set up micro-lending banking infrastructure in Sierra Leone and Liberia. But BRAC seems to worry more about its bottom line than it does about the well-being of its impoverished borrowers, the majority of whom are women and who pay an average annual interest rate of 40%. This twisted sense of priority could be seen after one of the worst cyclones in the history of Bangladesh that left thousands dead in 2007, destroying the entire villages and towns in its path. In the cyclone's wake, the Omidyar-funded BRAC microlending debt collector showed up at the disaster zone along with other microlenders and went to work aggressively shaking down borrowers, forcing some victims, mostly women, to go so far as to sell their relief and aid materials or to take out secondary loans to pay off their first loans. According to a study about microlenders in the aftermath of this cyclone, the victims who lost almost everything in the cyclone experienced pressures and harassment from non-governmental organizations, NGOs, for repayment of microcredit installments. Such intense pressure led some of the borrowers to sell out the relief materials they received from different sources. Such pressure for loan recovery came from large organizations such as BRAC, ASA, and even the Nobel Prize-winning organization Griman Bank. Even the most severely affected people are expected to pay back on a weekly basis with the prevailing interest rate. No system of break or holiday period is available in the bank's current charter. No exceptions are made during a time of natural calamity. The harsh rules practiced by the micro-lender organizations led the disaster-affected people even selling their relief assistance. Some even had to sell their leftover belongings to pay back their weekly installments. These tactics may be harsh, but they pay off for micro-lenders, and it's a lucrative operation. BRAC's primary targets are women, offer loans with predatory interest rates, and use traditional values and close village relationships to shape and pressure borrowers into selling and doing whatever they can to make their weekly payments. It works. Loan recovery rates for this industry averages 95 to 98%. So do predatory microloans really help lift the poorest people in the world out of poverty? Neoliberal ideology says they do. And the Omidyar network represents one of the purest distillations of that ideology put into practice in the poorest and most vulnerable regions in the world. Part 5 will follow.